So once the light goes on, hit the A to let us know that you are present, and so we can get it registered, and we'll check all your clickers for operation. Once the vote is closed, we'll scroll through to make sure that all of your votes are displayed and received. I hear that I turn green with this light, so you get a little bit of adventure every time the light turns green. Add some interest. Can you scroll through? There you go.
And Heather, their signatures, their proof of attendance.
Yeah.
If they miss it, just in case you say something about that.
To those joining us, if you did not hit your clicker, it's okay. Your signature will register you with the clerk that you're in attendance. We're just testing. We use this as a test. All right. So town meeting requiring 100 members for a quorum and having 109 in attendance. I see there's a sufficient number of members present to permit us to open the meeting, and I so do declare. Welcome to all, to our town meeting members. Welcome back. I hope you had a nice couple evenings off. I also want to welcome again members of our town staff, members of boards and committees, town consultants, and article presenters, as well as residents and other visitors who have all joined us tonight here or also via WinCam. Welcome one and all. I'm Heather Von Mering, your town meeting moderator. Please refer to me as Madam Moderator going forward. We are joined by the town meeting staff, who I will introduce before they speak this evening, and including to my right is our town clerk and clerk of the meeting, Mary Ellen Lannon. This evening, the agenda before us is to start with Article 1. We have the school committee's report coming before us, along with the Council of Aging has asked if they could give a minute or two update on some things that they need some support on. We also have Article 8, which is the transfer for free cash to supplement fiscal year 23 budget. Article 11, we will hear the Capital Planning Committee report. Article 13, we will consider appropriate monies for Lake Street Bridge Replacement Project. Article 14, we will consider appropriating monies for traffic improvements associated with the Lynch School project. Article 15, we will consider appropriate monies for flood mitigation project maintenance. And then we will end this evening on Article 17, which we will consider appropriate money for traffic calming mitigation per the Eversource line. I will plan to take a break. We're aiming for about 7:45, 8 o'clock for that break. Pending on where we are, that will determine where, which article, in between which articles we will break, and it'll be a 10-minute break. One of the moderator's role is to ensure order and expediency of the business before us. In response, given our robust agenda, speakers on the articles will be provided 3 minutes during this evening. It's the moderator's discretion to extend them up to 5, but after 5, the town body needs to vote to extend that. As always, we didn't discuss it, but please hold your applause after each speaker during the debates. Our expressions of our opinions on the motions before us should be shared in the space through our voices at the microphones and in the votes we cast. Please know we're not at a sporting event. As I like to end, we must bear in mind as we cast our votes, not only our personal interests, but also those of our community as a whole. As we deliberate, let each of us here tonight maintain an open mind, an open heart, graciousness when we disagree, a healthy sense of humor so that debates of this meeting will not be a source of division among us when our business here is finished. We will continue our meeting with a tradition with the Pledge of Allegiance. For those members who would like the option to join me, please rise. The flag is on the opposite side of the stage this evening. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may please be seated. Moving back to Article 1. I believe it is on page 3. Page 2. Moving to Article 1 of your green 2023 Spring Annual Town Meeting book. A lot of you are also doing it electronically. They are the same. We are reopening it up. It is moved and seconded that the report of town officers and finance committee be received and filed. Further on the motion before us, we will first hear from the school committee. Chairs, Michelle Bergstrom. One moment, we can't get your screen up and running. Can someone from the back turn that on? So. No. Staff, there's no video detected for this projector. Ms. Bergstrom, is it okay if we go to Council on Aging while tech works on this? All right. Mr. Hawley, on behalf of the Council of Aging, would you be up for giving your presentation while we try to get the technology up and running for the school committee's presentation? Thank you. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Just a quick, right?
Mm-hmm. Can we get a mic for Mr. Hawley? I'd give you mine if I could. You want to? We can grab you one. They're all turned on, so. Here, try them now. Try it now.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Town meeting, thank you for the opportunity. This is going to be short. It's not a full report. The Jenks Center COA rather, did file a report, written report for town meeting, but there's something in particular I wanted to be able to talk to you about. Let me begin by particularly for new town meeting members, say that the Jenks Center is thriving. And in fact, it's become a leader among Massachusetts senior centers. And we have made enormous strides in that direction over the last several years. It's a beautiful facility in the center of Winchester. If you haven't been there, I suggest you stop in and just see it so you understand what goes on there. It's a place to be with old friends and make new ones, to have fun, to be engaged, to be a valued member of your community. The Jenks Center serves hundreds of Winchester residents with programs and services both in person and online, and these programs include nutrition, transportation, health, exercise, education, entertainment, and social services. It also regularly hosts an array of other programming and public events for the entire Winchester community. Daily visits in person and online program participation, collaboration with other community organizations, and requests for additional activities and services are growing. And in fact, we've seen, of course, we had to shut down for a while during COVID, but since we have reopened the doors, it has been a tremendous increase in people coming to the center. A reflection of the kind of programming and activities are there and what it means for people to actually be together in person. It's time, however, as a result of all that, to update the Jenks Center's strategic plan And we need the entire community's participation to make sure we get this as right as we can. Whether you use the Jenks Center regularly or have never been there, whether you are in your 20s or your 90s, please take 5 minutes and take the survey. Ask other people to take the survey. Give us your feedback and suggestions. Help us identify programmatic and structural changes so that we can continue to adapt and improve the Jenks Center for you, a family member, a neighbor, or someone else you know in the community. Look for the poster in the lobby. After you've bought cookies from the Girl Scouts, just past it is the poster. There's a QR code on it. And as long as the moderator doesn't call you out for filling it out while you're sitting here and supposed to be paying attention, you could do that. But there are also hard copies that you could drop off at the Jenks Center, or you could simply go to the Jenks website and take the survey online at jenkscenter.org. So no matter your age, it's truly your Jenks Center too. Please help us remain vibrant and relevant for Winchester's older residents and for the entire community. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Now it's time, the long-awaited school committee presentation. Thank you. There you go.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. And I'm going to try this microphone again. Much better this time. Good evening, and thank you, Town Meeting, for accommodating the school committee presentation this evening. First, I'd like to thank the other members of my committee, Tom Hopcroft, Seamus Brady, Karen Mariama Bolognese, and Chris Nixon. Without all of their collaboration and help and the work of the entire committee, Dr. Hackett, Mr. Rowe, and Mr. Marin, I would not be able to stand before you this evening. It is truly a collaborative effort over at the school department, and we are happy to present this presentation to you this evening. Superintendent Dr. Hackett and Finance Director Peter Rowe first presented the school committee with our needs-based rollover budget this winter, and there was a 4.8% increase over FY23. Through careful fiscal management, they were able to present a proposed budget of 4.15% in late January of 2023, and this was a decrease from the initial rollover budget. The school committee wanted to be sure to fulfill a commitment of the 2018 operational override and increase the Mandarin position at the high school to a full-time position. This just slightly increased our budget to a 4.17% increase over FY23, and this is the budget that was approved at our budget hearing on January 31st. Each spring, the district accounts for any staff retirements, which this year, due to our contract incentive, allowed the school department to take an additional reduction, and we presented a 3.76 final budget that was supported by both the school committee and the finance committee. The FY24 contractual obligations that you see reflected here reflect that budgetary change due to retirements. This also includes a partial offset of our special education deficit, the cost to return our high school athletic trainer from a contracted to a staff position, which is necessary for the health and safety of our athletes, the increase of a Mandarin position, and the transportation contractual increases. We're grateful for a collaborative relationship with our union that resulted in a contract settlement in December of 2022, which was well ahead of many of our peer districts. This settlement allowed us to better plan not just for this budget, but for the next several years, and to recognize the hard work of our professional staff. Additionally, the new contract adds 10 minutes to the school day in the 2024-25 school year. How was the budget reduced then, you might ask? With a planned decrease of 3 elementary sections due to a drop in elementary enrollment and the net personnel savings from 5 teacher retirements, the personnel line was able to be reduced in this budget by $603,998,000 from $2,518,910 to $1,914,912,000. This is reflected in the 3.76 budget as presented. But we do have other budget factors to watch. Increases in special education staffing and cost included an unprecedented state-approved 14% increase in out-of-district tuition rates. We'll discuss more about that in a moment. This budget adds no new programming to the district. It also does not reduce any student or family fees. Though the committee discussed a desire to reduce fees, there was no room in the budget to do so. There are no wants in this budget, only our needs. And it's not advancing. There we go. It is not cooperating with me. There we go. Special education continues to be an important part of our budgeting process. The rate setting commission for the state of Massachusetts for out-of-district special education tuition allowed for up to a 14% increase in out-of-district tuition for FY24. This is one of the largest increases in recent memory and is reflected in our general fund increase. The $531,060 differential seen at the bottom of this slide for FY24 is the structural gap that is being created in the Winchester Public Schools budget year over year as special education costs continue to rise. This cost is not included in our base general fund allocation. So how are we covering the structural gap in special education? We do have some one-time funding sources. We have ESSER 2, which expires in the fall of 23, and ESSER 3, which expires in the fall of 24. ESSER funding can only be used for education and services related to learning loss and COVID. While we'll be able to apply ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funding in our budget for FY24 to support special education, the gap will continue to exist. We'll be using one-time funding to replace a recurring mandated necessary expense. While we appreciate that the state has slightly increased their contribution to the town's Chapter 70 grant for education in FY24, we continue to advocate at the state level for a revised circuit breaker formula that better addresses extraordinary and out-of-district tuition costs so that funding is available when ESSER is not available to cover these costs. Where are the enrollment projections for the district? This is some good news. We're seeing a stabilization of both special education and general education enrollment. We saw about 20% of our students require special education services during the pandemic years. Prior and currently, this is around 17% of our students. Incoming elementary classes seem to be stabilizing or returning to pre-pandemic levels. Over 300 students are currently pre-enrolled for kindergarten. That's a higher number than last year and the year before. Is this the new normal? Dr. Hackett has suggested that a district-wide enrollment study sometime in FY24, after the Cambridge and River Street developments are fully open, will help us plan strategically for the future. So how do those elementary classrooms balance out? Well, you have to first think about our neighborhood schools. So prior to the operational override, Winchester Public Schools were seeing large class sizes at the elementary and high school level, with some high school classes sitting 35 students and some elementary classrooms exceeding their targets. An important goal of the 2018 override was to offer some class size relief. At the elementary schools, we're projected to decrease by 56 students from fiscal year 22 to the fiscal year 24. Meanwhile, we've reduced elementary sections by 10 classrooms, from 110 sections to 100 sections for FY24. We aim to keep class sizes reasonable by not exceeding our targets that are seen on the chart above. Neighborhood schools offer an additional challenge to this in balancing class sizes. While here we're able to show the average class size per grade across the district, there will be some variation from class to class and school to school based on needs and enrollment. The Cambridge and River Street developments will begin to sign leases in late summer of 2023. Some elementary classrooms will also need space available to welcome incoming students throughout the 24-25 school year. The middle and high school will be able to more easily accommodate additional students due to the educational programming design and stable enrollment. While the school department believes that we can absorb these projected student enrollments for this fiscal year, this would be definitely an area to watch for growth in fiscal year 25. We also have the new Lynch project. The we'll talk about in just a minute, but an important part of our thinking and planning for this budget was the plan for transporting students from Lynch to Parkhurst next year. In order to make the transition from Lynch to Parkhurst as smooth as possible, the school department, in collaboration with the school committee, is developing a plan to bus all Lynch students to Parkhurst. We want to ease the burden on Winchester traffic and Lynch families. We'll need to have discussions with the WEA and the Lynch transition team. We'll need to be aligned with after-school care. Thanks to a grant from the Select Board from the FY24 ARPA funds, $234,000 was provided for the cost of the buses. Approximately $80,000 from the district revolving fund will cover our loss in fees. This will be providing busing free to all Lynch families. This will also help alleviate traffic in the Parkhurst neighborhood for our friends and neighbors who live in that area. The next steps: a new start time will be required at Lynch for the 23-24 school year and will come before the school committee for consideration. We'll also be finalizing the routes for busing for FY24 bus registration, but no pickup will be before 7 a.m. We also have some facilities planning to think about for the next 3 to 5 years. Some of you may still be thinking, what about Morocco? Town meeting was generously supported a $3.6 million Morocco Life Extension Plan, which allowed for the repair of the roof and boiler replacement. Electrical updates will happen this summer. School committee remains committed to finding a long-term solution for replacing Morocco sometime between 2028 and 2030, as planned in the 2017 master plan. And what about central office?
Excuse me.
Yes.
How much more time do you need?
I have about 3 more slides.
What's the time on that?
Okay, thanks.
What's the time on it? I need to get their vote.
Okay,
How much time do you need?
3 minutes.
Town meeting, the presenter would like to extend their time by 3 minutes. All those in favor? All those opposed? Please proceed.
Staff will be moved out of Parkhurst and temporarily divided among 2 to 3 district school buildings as space is available for the duration of the Lynch project. Given the failure of the Warren article to support the reconstruction of the carriage house as central office space, school committee is still seeking a permanent home for central office. Old Lynch, new Lynch. On the left, you can see Lynch conditions today, and on the right, the Lynch of tomorrow. Thank you to all of you and all your neighbors and friends who supported the debt exclusion override in January that's making this possible. I want to thank the Lynch 2025 website for the pictures on the previous page and for some of these pictures as well. And if you'd like to see more about Lynch, you can look there. The Lynch Hawks look forward to soaring into their new home in 2025. And I just have a few thank yous. I understand that there were reports of the school committee that were greatly exaggerated about our time in Disney. I even heard that Dr. Hackett was with us, but we did want to thank enormous thanks this evening to Nick and Mary Costello and the Winchester High School Music Department. While we frequently celebrate our athletic and academic successes, our support of the arts, drama, and music for our students is equally important. Once every 4 years, our students get the opportunity to be professional musicians for a day at the country's largest employer of professional musicians for the largest crowds they've ever played before in their lives, and they shined. Thank you to the community members and organizations who helped get every student there who wanted to attend. And the last several years have been a period of uncertainty for all of us. We appreciate town meeting support as we continue to weather the impacts. From unprecedented and unpredicted changes in enrollment to retaining key staff, to providing adequate support for students' mental health and academic needs through these years, the district could not do what it does without your support of our budget. Thank you for continuing to support the Winchester Public Schools.
Thank you very much. And that will conclude Article 1. All the reports will be on file and have been accepted at this point. Moving on to Article 8. Article 8 is on page 12 of your Town of Winchester 2023 Springtown Meeting motion booklet. It requires a majority vote, and it is co-sponsored by the Town Manager and the Finance Committee. The presenter will be, I believe, the Finance Committee, correct? At this time, I'm going to have them present on all of them. I will read each motion individually for a voice vote. If it doesn't hear like it's a majority, we will go to the clickers.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to keep this real simple and wrap all these up into the fact that the budget, as you know, this year, we're going to vote on it on Monday, was a year ago when we presented, and since then a lot has changed. And basically all of the motions in here is to make sure that we have money to pay the bills through the rest of the year. So it's jointly put together with the town manager's office. And if you do have specific questions, then we'll probably bounce back and forth and try to answer the different questions. But otherwise, this is what it is to finish out the year for things that we hadn't planned a year ago when we did the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Right now, the screen is not connected. Can you reconnect it? Flip the switch again? Whatever you did before? No?
Should get the slide, Matt? No?
It's up, but it's not showing.
Nothing on this end.
Okay.
Don't wait, that just
there we
moved, so
go.
it could be coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, it doesn't like the
Just want to make sure everyone can see it. So I'm going to read each one individually and ask if you have any questions or comments on each item. If you don't, we'll go directly to a vote. It is motion number 1. It is moved and seconded that the town transfer $14,600 from free cash to the fiscal year 2023 Collector Treasurer, Department 1350 Personnel Service Budget. Town meeting members, do you have any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it. The motion passes. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. Motion number 3, it is moved and seconded that the town transfer $70,000 from free cash to the fiscal year 2023 Department of Public Works, Department 4100 expense budget. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion passes. Motion number 4 is moved and seconded that the town transfer $83,811.81 from free cash to the fiscal year 2023 Department of Public Works, Snow and Ice, Department 4171 Personnel Services budget. Any questions or comments? Yes. Yep, so I'm going to repeat that because WinCam was not be able to pick that up for sound. The question is regarding, can you please provide more information regarding the snow and ice? There's been a decline in the amount of snow we received, but there's also increase in fees and how that's being planned for over the years. And there has also been a discussion about an increase in that line item in the budget. For that, would FinCom like to take that, or would like the town manager or the Department of Public Works? Mm-hmm. I can answer the snow and ice budget, but DPW can answer. Okay. So for the first question, it's going to go to FinCom. Can you please provide town meeting more information on the budget on the snow and ice and projections for future years?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Yes, so snow and ice is done where we put a budget out there, and it's one of the few budgets that we are allowed to overspend after every year. It's been more than 10 years since we changed that line item. It's $400,000 that we put in, and we're averaging more like 600. But as soon as we make a change, we can't lower that budget if for some reason we don't need to do that anymore. But however, we did talk to DPW, and we said, would you ever overspend $500,000. So that went from 400 to 500 in that budget line item. You see it in the budget book. Because we want to make sure that it more accurately reflects what we spend on that budget, so that hopefully each year that number isn't high when we overspend it. But hopefully that also explains the question. I mean, glad to answer more on that. But yeah, we did do that just to better reflect that in the budget. Thanks.
We are going to next ask the question of the Department of Public Works. Our first introduction with our newest head of the department, Mr. Lassiere, I believe, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Welcome to town meeting. Can you please provide information about the costs directly with your department and how the costs are impacted right now?
Sure. I wasn't here for this past storms here in Winchester, but I did oversee a public works department in the North Shore. I can tell you that even though we didn't have a lot of snow this past year, you can't relate snow to costs, at least the amount of snow. We had a lot of long duration storms that had a lot of ice, so we spent a lot of money on salt this past year. When I looked through the records that we had here, we spent 2/3 of the budget just on the purchase of salt. So with the long duration storms, we had to have a lot of our personnel in through storms that lasted 24 hours, so a lot of expense went to those storms. So hopefully I answered those questions.
Thank you so much. Welcome. Any other questions or comments on this motion? Seeing no one else rise, all those in favor? All those opposed? The ayes have it and the motion passes. Moving on to motion number 5. It is moved and seconded that the town transfer $73,116.33 from free cash to the fiscal year 2023 Department of Public Works Snow and Ice, Department 4171 expense budget. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? The motion passes. Moving on to motion number 6, moved and seconded that the town transfer $25,000 from free cash to the fiscal year 2023 Unemployment Department 9130 expense budget. One moment, I'm going to get it up there so everyone can see it for those who don't have the book. We have 3 more motions.
Oh, no, it's the one from tonight. It says the 27th on it, on the cover sheet. Okay, there's no second page? All right, you can
All
use
right.
the one that's dated the 24th.
So as I already read the motion, I'll just clarify to town meeting, this is transfer $25,000 from free cash for the unemployment and expense budget. Did anyone have any questions? Seeing no one rise, all those in favor? All those opposed? The ayes have it and the motion passes. Moving on to motion number 7. It is moved and seconded.
Point of order?
Yes. It's a little out of order, but I'm going to allow it just so you can have clarity because I don't want anyone to sit with it after hearing that. FinCom, can you please provide clarity on why motion number 4 and number 5 is different amounts under the same department budget?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Yes, the first one is for salaries. Basically, it's called personal services. And then the second one is for expenses related to any usage of the expense side, anything they had to purchase, anything like that. So yeah, you need both. And that's why you see actually they had to overspend that budget. If you add those line items up, that's how much they overspend that budget for this year.
Thank you. Motion number 7. It is moved and seconded that the town transfer $20,000 from free cash to the fiscal year 2023 Medicare Department 9150 expense budget. Any questions or comments? Seeing no one rise, all those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion passes. The last motion under Article 8 on page 12 of your town meeting booklets is motion number 8, moved and seconded that the town transfer $190,000 from free cash to the fiscal year 2023 Reserve Fund, Department 9430 expense budget. Any questions? To FinCom, can you please clarify the differences in the department numbers and what they cover for each motion?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Yes. So the Finance Committee, and you see it in the budget, holds $400,000 for emergency, unforeseen things that happen during the course of the year. And this is things that are shored up. All the other motions you saw were things that shored up towards the latter part of the year. But during the year, the Finance Committee has what's called reserve fund transfer. The departments come and ask when they had additional expenses, unforeseen expenses, and emergency expenses, things like, I believe this past year, something happened at the high school roof, things like that, that's unexpected. So then we spend $190,000, and then that gets replenished at spring, because between now and June 30th, if something happens that we didn't know about, if something fails, the AC, the heating unit, it's not part of the expense, and the departments need a place to come to say, oh, we need to pay a bill, we need to fix it right now. And so the Finance Committee shores up, make sure we still hold $400,000. Anything that doesn't get used would just come right back to the town. Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing no one rise, all those in favor? All those opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion is passed. We will be moving now on to Article number 11 to hear the Capital Planning Committee report. That is on page 16 of your motion booklet. Just a reminder to town meeting, inside your motion booklet is also background on each article that gives you more depth. There isn't much on this article, but on some of the articles, especially the financials, there's more background in there that will give you more information about what is going on when we make the motions. It is moved and seconded that the revised Capital Planning Committee report for fiscal year 24 be received and filed. All those in favor? All those opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion passes. We will now be hearing from the chair, Mr. Roger McPeak, the chair of the Capital Planning Committee. You're welcome. Actually, it disconnected again. Work your magic. Thank you. It's a little finicky. There we go. Thank you so much. We'll get some duct tape. One moment.
How about now? Okay. Hopefully you all got a copy of the revised capital planning report. I want to walk through that with you this evening. It's the same great projects at the new, more expensive price. So I wanted to go over what you're going to see on Monday night. These are the projects that you'll see on the yellow sheet. So we won't really have time to sort of go through this. This is a FinCom article, but I wanted to talk about what we are proposing. First is in Article 19. These are all funded out of the Capital Stabilization Fund, our annual appropriation of $125,000 into the ADA account that's directed by the DAC. Next is $500,000 into roads and sidewalks, and that combined with the Chapter 90 money that we receive, which is about $500,000, also gets us to our target of about $1 million a year on roads and sidewalks. The next item is a transfer station trash trailer. This is one of the ones that has increased in price from the original amount of $87,625 up to about $115,000. So this is some of the actual impact that we've been talking about in terms of supply chain issues and just inflation and just in expanded costs of equipment and projects. The next is a Wildlands fire suppression vehicle. This is a Gator-style vehicle that has exchangeable equipment in the back. You could put in a little pumper, maybe 75 gallons worth of water that you can get back into areas like the fells that are difficult to reach, get back there quickly. And you can also change out the back and turn it into an evacuation sled type of situation. So that's for the fire department. Next is the street sweeper, $300,000. It also has gone up in price, as you can see. And our current one is on its last legs. We need to order these because these are long lead items, and we have one. So the next is the front end loader, and that's increased to $280,000 that we're replacing. It's reached the end of its useful life. The unit that we had actually been planning on buying was over $300,000, so we changed from what was going to be a John Deere unit to a Volvo unit, and the Volvo unit just increased less than the John Deere unit did. The next is a project for a study at Wedge Pond. If you're aware of the area, that's where Beauregard Beach is. Water comes in from the Horn Pond Brook right there and rapidly takes a left-hand turn and goes out over by Stop and Shop. This is a study to see if we can increase the circulation inside Wedge Pond so that we don't have to treat it during the summer, maybe don't have to shut down Beauregard Beach as often. And we just want to see if we can somehow increase the circulation in that pond. Next is Woodside Road corridor improvements. As you're probably all aware, we have a lot of work going on in that area. Between the repaving, I believe the speed tables went in last week. We have a water purification device that's going in. The intersection at Wildwood is also being reconfigured. This work is to go in to stabilize. If you're familiar with the area, people just pull off on the side of the road and use that area. It's nice, fishermen, things like that. But this will go into stabilizing the bank of the pond, putting in permanent parking area in that along that side, and also provide a few amenities in that area. The last is a new item, which is Parkhurst air-sourced heat pumps. Parkhurst, as you may be aware, has a cafe gymnatorium that sits off in its own environment. And we have a problem in that you can either adequately heat the gym, in which case you roast out sort of much of the rest of Parkhurst, or the rest of Parkhurst in cold weather is comfortable, but the gym is kind of cool. So this is an article that will disconnect the existing heating system there, install air source heat pumps, and it's a combination of money coming from the Energy Revolving Fund and incentives from Mass Save, and then the Capital Stabilization Fund is topping it up with $32,000 to get that accomplished over the summer before kids show up. The next is in Article 20, coming out of the Water Sewer Enterprise Fund, is just our standard funding for our MS4 permit. We really need to do that. That's just a requirement of the EPA. If you're paying close attention to the fall capital planning report, you may notice that we do not request the money for lead neck replacement that we had been anticipating that we were doing. We're getting very close to completing that project, and we're down to the last few number of lead necks. We got an abundance of one and only a few of the other. What can I say? So we're not asking for that money at this time. We want to get a good handle on how many more of the lead necks we have to replace. And then we'll come back and ask for that last bit of money. This was account closeouts. This was in the consent agenda. Thank you very much for approving that. You probably are all aware that this is just our housekeeping article. It moves money that was not utilized in a project back into the stabilization fund so that we can use it again. Article 13, which you'll hear about in a minute, is us asking for a second time for more money to complete the Lake Street Bridge, and the project has just gone up by that much, and I'll give you more details on that in a second. And finally, Article 14, we co-sponsored with the Select Board this article where they went out and got a general override to accomplish Lynch traffic projects in the area of New Lynch. And this initial work is for the engineering and public outreach that will go on in that, and it will be bonded against the Capital Stabilization Fund. And that's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. At this time, the Capital Planning Committee's report is filed and will be available as well on the town's website. We will be moving on to Article 13. I believe what we'll do is we'll do Article 13, and then we'll break for 10 minutes, and then we'll return for Article 14, 15, and 17. Article 13 requires a 2/3 vote. It is on page 18 of your 2023 Springtown Meeting motion booklet. It is sponsored by the Capital Planning Committee. I will be reading it in its entirety. It is fairly long, so hope you like my voice. It is moved and seconded that $395,000 is appropriated to pay costs of the Lake Street Bridge replacement project, consisting of the replacement of the bridge, including the cost of design, engineering, demolition of the existing bridge, site work, new foundations, substructures, superstructures, bridge rails, roadway pavement, sidewalks, landscaping, and temporary and permanent utility relocation, and all other costs incidental or related thereto, which appropriation shall be in addition to the $2,100,000 previously appropriated for the Lake Street Bridge replacement project pursuant to the vote of the town passed November 7th, 2019 under Article 13 at the 2019 Fall Town Meeting as amended by the vote of the town passed November 14th, 2022 under Article 9 at the 2022 Fall Town Meeting, that this appropriation shall be funded from the following sources and the following amounts. A, unexpected bond proceeds in the amount of $109,804.17 pursuant to Section 20 of Chapter 44 of the General Laws, which amount constitutes the total amount of unexpended proceeds related to the bonds issued for the Swanton Street Bridge project pursuant to the vote of the town passed under Article 33 at the Fall 2018 Town Meeting, which project has been completed and has no remaining cost to be paid. B, unexpected bonds proceeds in the amount of $4,615.83 pursuant to Section 20 of Chapter 44 of the General Laws, which amounts constitutes the total amount of unexpected proceeds related to the bonds issued for the Aberjona River Flood Mitigation Project pursuant to the vote of town passed under Article 24 of the Spring 2010 Town Meeting, which project has been completed and has no remaining cost to be paid. And C, the treasurer, with the approval of the Select Board, is authorized to borrow $280,580 under Section 7, subsection 1 of Chapter 44 of the General Laws, or under any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the town, therefore, that the town manager shall be authorized to have oversight of the project, and that in accordance with the Section 4-2 of the Town of Winchester Home Rule Charter, the town manager shall have the authority to enter into contracts and approve payments with respect to the project. On behalf of Article 13, Chair of the Capital Planning Committee. It's disconnected again.
Hold on.
Thank you very much, Matt, for all your help.
Ooh, new technology.
Well, the cable's down. I can feel it's going to snap off the end. So hopefully this will work. Jeepers creepers, what's going on today? Oh, so give it a second. I unplugged it.
Thank you for your patience, everyone.
There you go.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, again. So if anybody had any doubt, that motion is written by bond counsel, and it's completely inscrutable. I will try and explain what's going on in English. We went out, we bid this job, and even though we came to you last fall and asked for $600,000 more, we were short. We need $395,000 more in order to accomplish this, so that you understand that this is truly good numbers. We had 4 bidders on this project, 3 of which came in within 5% of each other. The low bidder was within 10% of the upper group, and so we take advantage of that. We've gotten the low bidder. That's just the reality of this bidding environment that we are seeing right now. If you think that somehow the project has been expanded, that is not the case. In fact, we shrunk the project. We were originally hoping to be able to keep open 1 lane of Lake Street there, and now we're going to have to close it because that was just prohibitively expensive. So we've reduced the scope of the project, and the bids have still come in much higher than we were expecting, and this is just what we need to do. Now, some of what's going on there. We were explaining there's $114,000, $420 of unexpended bond proceeds, predominantly from the Lake Street or from the Swanton Street Bridge area, and we're requesting an additional $280,500 of borrowing authority in order to be able to accomplish this project. And that includes, when we add that in, that includes our contingencies and things like that. So that we hope we can get through this project with this additional bit of money.
Thank you. All right. Further on the question, may we have a recommendation from the Select Board?
Good evening, everyone. The Select Board voted 5-0 favorable action on this article. Thank you.
Thank you. May we have a recommendation from FinCom?
The Finance Committee voted favorable action on Article 13.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Go ahead.
I just had a question on the borrowing and as to what's funding that future borrowing and why we wouldn't just request free cash for that amount?
To capital planning, could you please provide information about why it is going bonding versus using free cash?
Well, we don't control free cash. We control the Capital Stabilization Fund, or at least we make recommendations against the Capital Stabilization Fund. We're able to support it, and that's the typical utilization here.
Okay, so this comes out of the future funding comes out of the Capital Stabilization Fund?
Correct. This is bonded
Please direct
against the
questions to the
Capital
moderator.
Sorry?
You can answer, but going forward, please direct questions. Go ahead. You can answer the question if you'd like.
Correct.
Can you say correct what, though, because you were talking over each other? Correct what?
Correct. This will be bonded against the Capital Stabilization Fund.
Thank you. Further on Article 13.
Madam Moderator, through you to the, probably the Capital Committee, but maybe Town Manager. I'm concerned about the reduction of scope because at the last time we voted on this, there was going to be provided a temporary pedestrian bridge so that pedestrians could come through the job site throughout the time of work. And if you're a pedestrian, a detour around it would be a lot more time. And also, with regard to scope, the entrance to the path to Horn Pond is directly abutting the bridge, and the interface right now is obstructed with signage, and it's half dirt, half brick, etc. And so I want to know what's going to be done to make the bridge integrate with the path.
I believe to the Town Manager, could you please provide information regarding temporary pedestrian passage over that area during construction, and also what the plan is regarding the bike path that is there in the bridge and its integration?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Town meeting members. The first question regarding the pedestrian bridge, we did bid the project with an alternate. Alternate 1 was for the installation of a pedestrian bridge. The bridge will be fully closed during construction, both sides, no sidewalk access. So we are installing a temporary pedestrian bridge, basically right at the DPW across the river, or across the brook, so pedestrians are able to get through in that area. That is alternate 1. We expect, with the borrowing that we've requested here at town meeting, we expect to award alternate 1 to the contractor. The second question regarding the path, are you talking, Roger, during, through you, Madam Moderator, during construction or post-construction?
Both.
Post-construction.
Post-construction. So there is improvements being made to the sidewalk on the DPW side to better integrate the bike path across the path across the bridge for bikes as it coordinates with the Horn Pond Brook path itself in that area. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing no rise, I see that town meeting is ready. Given that this is a bonding, I would like to use our clickers. So if you could please pull your clickers out, we'll get the question ready for you, and thereafter we will break and return in 10 minutes. This requires a 2/3 vote. Clickers on, you have 30 seconds. We are currently voting on Article 13. This is to appropriate money for the Lake Street Bridge Replacement Project. A vote yes is in favor of the article. A motion no is a vote against the motion before you. Uh, 140 town meeting members haven't voted. There are 138 in the affirmative, 2 in the negative. The affirmative has it, and the motion passes. At this time, town meeting members, we will scroll through just for the fun of it, because we have time. We're going to break. You have 10 minutes. We will be back at 7:45. Don't forget to please go and visit the Girl Scouts. They are selling some sweet treats for you. We'll see you in 10 minutes. Thank you. but some of your town meeting members would like you to clarify your area of expertise if you use your profession to convey an opinion. On top of it, we now have a runner on our floor with a microphone, so if you would like to speak and stay where you are seated, a microphone will be brought to you. If you could just pause for a minute, they will be as quick as they can to get you a mic. And the reason we do that is so that WinCam can pick you up so the people at home can hear the questions that are being asked directly from you. We are now going to be moving on to Article 14. It requires a 2/3 vote, and it is sponsored by two. It's a co-sponsored article by the Select Board and the Capital Planning Committee. It is moved and seconded that $400,000 is appropriated to pay costs of engineering services for traffic improvements associated with the Lynch Elementary School project and in the surrounding neighborhoods, including all costs incidental and related thereto, that to meet this appropriation, the Treasurer, with approval of the Select Board, is authorized to borrow said amount under Section 7, subsection 7 of Chapter 44 of the General Laws, or under any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the town, therefore, that the town manager shall be authorized to have oversight of the project, and that in accordance with Section 4-2 of the Town of Winchester Home Rule Charter, the town manager shall have the authority to enter into contracts and approve payments with respect to the project. On behalf of the sponsor, the Select Board, Mr. Betancourt.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Town meeting. Article 14 comes before you to fund the Lynch Elementary School traffic improvement project. You may remember town meeting funded the original concept plans for this. Several years ago, when we opened the Vincent Owens School, we realized that we didn't include traffic as part of that project and that borrowing. So that wasn't funded. Town meeting eventually funded a stopgap temporary light at the intersection of Ridge and Johnson. And one of the things we realized with that is that when we have schools we're building that are for enrollment growth, we're going to have more kids, more cars, more bikes, more walkers, and we need to address safety, especially when we're looking at preserving our commitment to our neighborhood schools. So with that, in 2018, the school committee and the select board, we created the policy on traffic safety studies for school expansion projects. So when we're doing a project that involves enrollment increases and expansion, as I said, that's something that we're going to need to address traffic safety for, so and make it a part of the project. So that's what we're doing here. This is the official policy that we voted on April 9th, 2018, and it's to examine the volume of traffic patterns for pedestrians. It's to analyze the capacity and performance and safety of the sidewalks, crosswalks, and traffic signals, and recommend policy, regulatory, and operational and capital improvements to ensure the safety of students. So it's our goal to include this, and it's what we've been doing since. And many of you may remember as well that we, with the McCall expansion project, Phase 1 and Phase 2, we included a traffic project on Main Street in front of McCall and along the side of Mystic Valley Parkway. Hugely successful. Those areas we did a traffic study, very dangerous. As you know, we have a lot of kids that are walking to school, which we love, biking to school, which we love. We've had some kids get hurt, be hit by cars. We're trying to do the best we can to make sure that people feel safe, kids are safe, and families can send their kids to school and feel safe. And here's a couple designs that we did when the Ridge and Johnson project here, the concept plans for both Ridge and Johnson and in front of McCall there when we were doing both those projects. And that top picture is actually my daughter Violet there with her arms, raised out there as well. So, so it's funny. She never has a backpack. Still, she's going to be at the high school next year. I don't know what she's doing, but. So this concept plan that town meeting funded for Lynch, as you can see, identified a lot of critical areas. That area is high traffic. There's a lot of commuters going through there at high speeds. We've been addressing it kind of piecemeal, but this is a large expansion project with kindergartners and preschoolers that are going to be going there, and we feel the need to substantially impact the safety and improve it there. We've had a lot of public engagement and input. We had two formal information sessions back in October, one on the Horn Pond Brook side, one on the Pond Street side. We had 3 additional information sessions as well in person as part of the project. and we will be engaging with residents in the neighborhood. I mean, one of the things that we see is neighborhood traffic patterns change, where people live change, where people are walking change, where we need crossing guards. It's something that we've addressed investments over time as well. So it's an ongoing project and analysis that we're going to continue. This was actually the project informational website here, and you can see it was identified in that middle column there, a link to the traffic and safety improvements that we were requesting as part of the question that voters eventually approved, and the informational website is still up there with the links, so people can look at the different renderings that we have in the concept plans. Article 14 request here, you can see the Lynch in its current state and the new facility. We've seen some of those pictures, and what we're looking to do is borrow $400,000 to pay for the cost of the engineering services for the traffic improvement associated with the Lynch project in surrounding neighborhoods. As I mentioned, in January 2023, the voters approved a general override of $400,000 to be directed toward the Capital Stabilization Fund for this purpose. The traffic improvements are estimated to cost around $3 million. It was a strategic decision of the Select Board to make this a general override rather than a debt exclusion override. As you heard from Mr. McPeak, we've lost just when interest rate increases about $375,000 of purchasing power for the stabilization fund. So this enables us to do a couple school-focused projects right now, but help keep that revenue coming into the stabilization funds and really just keep our head above water, which allows us to hold off a larger capital override right now as we're looking for large school projects and other investments. So happy to answer any questions. Thank you, town meeting. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you very much. Further on the question, may we have a recommendation from the Finance Committee? Chair of the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. The Finance Committee voted unanimously unfavorable action on this article. And to give you some background, this is the exact language. We were not able to communicate with the community because it's a ballot question, but we also voted unanimously to unfavorable action on question 2 here. Which says specifically, shall the town of Winchester be allowed to assess an additional $400,000 in real estate and personal property taxes for the purpose of funding capital stabilization? If this were for Lynch, then it should have said for Lynch to be borrowed. This is not clearly state that this is an override in there. It's a perpetual tax, and it rises 2.5% yearly. It was voted for. You can see this is actually the result from the town website. This is not a debt exclusion, and Lynch is not mentioned, let's say. Reasons why we voted unanimous unfavorable action, and we urge you to vote no, is that, as mentioned, this is borrowing $400,000 related to question 2. We currently have $194 million in debt. That's total across all the different schools and different projects. And that's not yet including Lynch. And then why in this article are we borrowing $400,000 at the high interest rate right now? If this is a priority of the Select Board, we urge the Select Board, who is sitting on $3 million, to use ARPA money for this project. So we urge the town meeting members to vote no on Article 14. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a recommendation from the school committee?
The school committee hasn't taken a vote on this article in particular, but we did support the general override that the Select Board put forward as part of the Lynch question.
Thank you. Any other boards or committees with recommendations to town meeting? Seeing no one rise at this time, town meeting members, if you would like to come to the microphones with any questions or comments you may have, Now is the time. Jackie Welch, please.
Yeah, I'm Jackie Welch from Precinct 5. First of all, I wanted to thank Michael Betancourt for that comprehensive presentation. And also, this is belated, and I know you probably got a lot of praise last time with the VO Lite, but that was amazing. And it was like so helpful, not only for the kids going to school, but that whole area. So, and I really respect what our finance chair has just articulated. It's obviously really important. But so is the needs that Mr. Betancourt articulated so well. And it just seems like this is a really principal part of the whole, school improvement project for Lynch. This is just a critical part of it because obviously if kids get injured going to this new school, that's not a good thing. And I do remember when that town meeting article passed in 2018, sort of setting in motion that we were going to try to prioritize this. So seems like, once again, the funding is the biggest question, and so I don't know, through you, Madam Moderator, if either the Finance Chair could potentially elaborate, or maybe the Select Board could, on whether or not really there is a possibility of using the ARPA funds, but otherwise, maybe we should also hear from Capital Planning if they're okay with this, because I think it's a really important article, and I'd really love to support it. It just seems like there's this hitch with the finance, but if capital planning is supporting this, then that seems really significant, and further support's a yes vote. Thank you.
Thank you. So there's two questions before the meeting. The first one is regarding ARPA funding. If the Select Board could give more detail on the status of the ARPA funding that was referenced in FinCom's presentation. And thereafter, I'm going to ask for capital planning, the Chair of Capital Planning, to provide their own voice.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, and thank you for the question. So we identified this as a funding source for this specific project, and you'll hear from Roger McPeak from the Capital Planning Committee. They jointly sponsored this article with us, and so even if we say the money should be going to the stabilization fund and letting the Capital Planning Committee identify how they want that money to be used, they already have done that. They already agreed that this is what the money should be used for. So, and Mr. McPee can explain that a little bit further. So it would be a real bait and switch, I think, especially for the Lynch community. We communicated quite a lot on this, as I mentioned before, that this is what this was for. And what you didn't see there with the question is, right above that question on the ballot was the Lynch debt exclusion override. So it was part of that, it was part of our communication, and it was part of every single thing that we discussed. We don't have the ARPA funds to do this. This is not what we identified that for. This revenue was raised for this purpose, and it would really be, frankly, a little bit dishonest on part of the Select Board and the Finance Committee to move forward something that was a different use than those funds that we tied to this Lynch replacement project. Thank you.
Further on the question, Mr. McPeak, could you please provide, as a representative of Capital Planning, your position on Article 14?
Yes, we are co-sponsors of this article. We were brought in a little bit later in the process, perhaps, than we would have liked, but we were brought in to comment on should it be a debt exclusion or should it be a general override, and the Select Board made the decision to go with a general override. That long-term will very much help the stabilization funds and the capital problems that we have in the town. Immediately, it will accomplish the goals of the Select Board and get those traffic projects around New Lynch completed. So yes, we voted to co-sponsor this article and are in favor of it. We hope you will support it as well.
Thank you. Further on the question? I believe the town manager, would you like to take this question about, there's a townwide traffic study that is going on, and the question is the duplication, will there be duplication in the efforts between the traffic needs of Lynch and the townwide traffic study?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. That's correct. Town meeting has funded a townwide transportation master plan, which we are currently working on, and we hope to have a public meeting sometime before the summer on that. I like to think of these as two separate but similar issues. The Select Board has a policy that supports transportation and pedestrian safety improvements around school building projects. So although these projects may have been developed as part of that overall transportation master plan, given the need to reconstruct the school at this point, they are on a slightly accelerated kind of schedule outside of the transportation master plan so that we can support and provide safe pedestrian and hopefully reduce the vehicular traffic going to our new elementary school once it's constructed. Thank you.
Thank you. Will you please send town meeting that hearing when it comes, or the meeting when it goes out, so we all know? Thank you. What's your follow-up question?
Oh, actually, can I have two follow-ups? The first follow-up is to the town manager, so please don't sit down. Thank you. Sorry, through the Madam Moderator. So what's the timeline on the town-wide traffic study? Like, how much of a gap are we looking at?
Can you please provide the timeline for the master plan?
Sure. So as I mentioned, we're hoping to have a public hearing sometime before everyone kind of leaves town for the summer. We are working with our design consultant, who is also the same design consultant working on the school project, the Lynch School project. And then once that transportation master plan is developed, staff will use that as part of our capital planning process when we submit projects to the capital planning committee.
Is there a specific time frame number associated with that? Months, years?
In terms of?
How long it will take to go from where we're at to the completion of that?
To implement it? Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be able to guess on that. There's a lot to do, and it would be entirely dependent upon funding availability. Yes.
Did you have the third question?
Yeah, third question. So I guess this is to the Select Board. So this was a general override for $400,000. It didn't reference Lynch in the question. I understand the Select Board's desire to make sure or mandate whatever agreement to do the traffic study around any new school project, so I appreciate that. But what drove the decision to make this a general override rather than a singular debt exclusion override? And perhaps, like, in terms of communicating to the town and the voters, should you have maybe done a third question for that general override so that people were completely clear that this money was sort of going to be in perpetuity and wasn't going to be used for capital planning at this point in time? I guess I'm just wondering if you could clarify what the decision-making process was.
To simplify the question, to the Select Board, can you please provide information on why you chose to do it as a general override versus a debt exclusion, and that the question did not have the word Lynch in it?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Thank you, Dorothy, for the question. So legally, we can't identify specific projects when we're doing a general override. So it's going to identify the where the money is going and how it's being raised. And so, and we did discuss that. And as I mentioned before, and Town Council can respond to this as well and further explain it. But I think that's that. And as I mentioned, our strategy was looking at where the stabilization fund was. We are identifying this as the first project that's going to be using these funds. But later on, after that bonding and the borrowing is done, it'll go into the stabilization fund to be for future projects as well. So that was our strategic decision. We were faced with looking at a long list of capital projects and maybe upwards to a $20 million capital debt exclusion override for specific projects. And we wanted to give residents a little bit of breather by doing it this way. And so that was our strategy.
Further on the question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Moderator. Jennifer Hafley, Precinct 7. I live near Lynch and have a student at Lynch, but I have several questions. May I have? Yep. Through you, I believe, to Select Board. My first question actually had to do with the traffic study as well, so I guess there's not an answer of where this would fall as a priority in town, so I will leave that one unless somebody can answer it. My second, my understanding, I may be incorrect, is that town policy is to not fund a study if there are not funds available for construction. And for the $3 million in construction, I'm wondering where those funds will be coming from. Also, what is the timeline for both the study and the construction? And my last question is, what would happen to this $400,000 if it's not approved for this cause tonight? Thank you.
Thank you. To the Select Board, can you please provide just a re-overview of the timeline for it, and also what would happen if it is not used? There's one other item in there. I think it was already answered, but if you would like to repeat how the priority,
Sure.
priority.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Thank you, Ms. Affelli, as well. We did identify a funding source for this, and it was this specific question, and we raised the money for this project specifically. So we came to town meeting for money for the study. We feel that it's important that when we're doing school projects that we also make sure that the kids are safe. It's a substantially larger building with substantially more students going there. There will be more traffic, and I think that when we look at the overall town-wide traffic study, that is being done by the same engineers that are doing this project as well. So they know that they've already done this area in essence, and we'll be focusing on other areas around the town. And we've already done some work on Woodside Road as well. As you know, we just put new speed humps in there, and which really made quite a difference. It's something that we haven't done before, but have a lot of requests from people, especially from the Traffic and Transportation Advisory Committee. So that's the money. I think there was the other question, where it would go if we don't spend on this. It would go.
Sorry, did you answer you're saying this body has already approved?
I'm sorry,
the
can't
construction?
interrupt.
Sorry.
Can you please provide where the money will go if this does not pass?
The money will go into the Capital Stabilization Fund, and the Capital Planning Committee will make a recommendation to town meeting on how to spend that money in the future. And the point that I just wanted to iterate, Ms. Felly, is that they have made a recommendation on how to spend this money, and it's on this specific project and part of this request through Article 14.
And can you also provide the clarity of where the $3 million will come from to actually fund the construction piece?
Right. Sorry if I wasn't clear on that. So this is money for debt service that it's a borrowing for authorization for that money. So with traffic projects, we can only borrow over 15 years. So it'll be about $280,000 to $300,000 on debt service over 15 years to fund the $3 million as part of the full project. So.
Did you have a follow-up question?
Follow-up, yes, please, Madam Moderator. Was the project ever put out for bid, or is Tool directly hired?
I believe it's actually the town manager who makes it. Was the project put out to bid, or was it directly provided and delivered to Tool for the engineering?
So Tool is selected as the engineering firm. We will bid the project when it goes to construction. We're not required to issue an RFP or an RFQ to select a designer for engineering projects.
Thank you. Further on the question, stage right, Mike.
Sally Dale, Precinct 7. And I think part of my early questions were answered, which had to do with why a specific project that was time certain would go as a general override, which is a recurring annual thing in perpetuity. So what I understand is it was proposed that it be in addition to the Capital Stabilization Fund, and that the Capital Committee voted to apply it to the traffic safety around Lynch, which I understand is necessary because the MSBA, if I've got the acronym correctly, doesn't fund adjacent street improvements to school improvements. So I understand the necessity of the money. It was the decision to make this ongoing stream, it was presented to town meeting members as being specifically part of the Lynch construction, and that this $400,000 in this first year would be used for those road improvements that we saw on the map. Does this mean that that $400,000 will be for school traffic safety improvements in perpetuity? Or does it mean that this was simply another way to get another $400,000 a year into the capital budget? And don't misunderstand me. I understand the capital budget is hugely inadequate with, I believe, something like an $80 million backlog of unfunded capital requests. So I don't begrudge any additions to this budget. It was the way that it was presented to town meeting as specifically tied to the Lynch project, but presented as an operating override that I found very confusing.
To that, I'm going to actually ask the chair of the Capital Planning Committee to please provide town meeting information on the Capital Stabilization Fund and how you chose priority for this project. And then to answer your second point that you made, town meeting decides how it's made. So if you want to come and answer that, how you bring recommendations to town meeting and how we make those decisions.
Thank you. This was a project that was brought forth by the select board. It was their priority. They came to us and they asked us, would you like to see it as a debt exclusion? Would you like to see it as a general override? A debt exclusion brings the advantage to it that it can be very specific in what goes forward before the town and says it's for this and it lasts this long. The general override was attractive to capital because once their goal of the projects that they had for Lynch was completed, those monies would continue to flow into the Capital Stabilization Fund and would enable us to utilize those going into the future. So we were in favor of that because it provides us more stability longer term on these. And we agreed, they did the hard work. They went out and sold it to the town. They went out and did presentations and public appearances and sold it to the town, and the residents voted for it. And we agreed, having done that hard work, it is our responsibility to support that, to support the reasons, the rationale that they went out and did the general override. And we are happy to do that, and we hope the town will support that as well.
And that the town meeting at the end of the day is the one who is the determining body of how the money is used.
That's correct. So it goes into the stabilization funds. We make recommendations,
Great.
but at the end of the day, town meeting will decide.
Okay, I think I understand. Thank you.
Further on the question?
Good evening, Madam Moderator. Greg Sawicki, Precinct 1. I have two questions. One, I think, is to be addressed to Finance Committee through you. Could you clarify a little bit, is the position of the Finance Committee that this project should not be done at all, or that it requires an alternate source of funding?
To FinCom, can you please provide your recommendation that this project not be done at all, or that there is a different funding source, and what funding source that is?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. That's a great question. Thank you. We do support the project. We don't support the funding source. This particular article says borrow $400,000 and then pay it off using a portion of the money from the Capital Stabilization Fund. We estimate, and it's just an estimate, we don't know what the interest rate will be. It will be around $10,000 a year or something. But we don't oppose Lynch traffic. We just oppose borrowing the $400,000 to do it. Use a different funding source is what we're saying. If you're voting this down, we're like, do not borrow this money at a high interest rate right now. Thank you.
Can you clarify what that funding source you're recommending is?
Well, I mean, we had ARPA on the list, right? And we said that if it's a priority of the select board, why is that not part of the ARPA money? Obviously, there's money in the capital stabilization should the CPC decide that this is a priority and use the money there. So those are possibilities. Thank you.
And I have a second question, Madam Moderator.
Yep.
This is, I think, directed at a capital planning or select board. If town meeting does vote down this article tonight, would that delay other work related to the Lynch construction project? Would it push everything back to the town as supported by months, years, to prevent the actual construction of the new school?
What was it the first, if they do or do not?
If town meeting does not approve this article,
To the select board, if town meeting does not approve this article, can you discuss the delay to the traffic improvements of Lynch and the project around the construction of Lynch?
Thank you, Madam Moderator, Mr. Zwicky. So it would not. It may impact the scope of the project. We have a long list of requests for ARPA that are, and the stabilization funds as well, that are very high priority health and safety requests. And that's what we've got 4 roofs to do. We've got roofs on schools that are in disrepair. And as I said before, we probably do need a large capital override. We were surprised at the scale of the new school, the cost of it, and we wanted to give residents a breather. That's why we said to them, please vote for this additional tax levy for this particular purpose, for safety around the school. We could have included, the MSBA would have supported a smaller amount of traffic work around the school, but just where Lynch is located, you can't just put a crosswalk on one street and a crosswalk on the other corner. It's got to be a full plan. And what our intention has always been is when we address these traffic studies, we take care of the project in full, make sure it's safe, and then we move on to the next project.
May I ask one clarifying question, Madam Moderator?
You can ask for a clarification.
Just a clarification, you're saying it won't delay perhaps the traffic improvements that may need to happen, but will it delay at all the actual construction of the new school? We're having students move to Parkhurst in the fall. You know, will this delay this at all? The town is expecting the school to be reconstructed.
No, it shouldn't. I mean, there could be other delays, of course, by us waiting and identifying funding sources that we may have to come back to town meeting, might have to go back to the voters, with a debt exclusion if that's what the FinCom is asking us to do. It's any delay in these projects is significant, and we have been working with the EFPBC and the schools to make sure that this project is done appropriately, but also in parallel to the school construction project. So our delays may impact, some of the materials being delivered, the laydown area, the engineering process. So we can't all be working necessarily in the same place at the same time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further on the question?
Yes, John Miller from Precinct 6. I'm speaking on behalf of myself and not on behalf of FinCom. My question is to Finance Committee, though. When will the $400,000 that the voters added through the override in January, when will the town start collecting those additional property taxes? That's the first question. And the second question is, if that $400,000 is going to beginning to be collected in July, why would we borrow money now?
That actually is not a question for FinCom because it would go to staff. So staff, could you please provide information on when the $400,000 money will be received from the town, and then when the borrowing would start if the article were to pass?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. It was, I believe, in the language of the vote that went to the voters, the money will be collected starting July 1st of 2023 on that, for that general override. We're requesting the funding, the borrowing authorization this evening at town meeting, and I think it's a little confusing because both of the numbers are $400,000, but it's just coincidental. So $400,000 a year, voters approved a general override of $400,000 a year to go annually into our capital stabilization fund. That will grow each year at 2.5% going forward. That happens in perpetuity. We are requesting this evening, coincidentally, $400,000 to do the engineering for the proposed traffic improvements in this area. We will ultimately, if the project is a $3 million scope with construction, we will issue a permanent borrowing for that project. What we typically do is issue a temporary, what we call ban, a temporary borrowing until we get to the point where we're ready to permanently borrow funds. So we will issue a ban for $400,000, likely sometime in July, after the FY24, so that we can hire an engineer to do the design for this work. And so we will start paying back the interest on that ban in FY25. I think that answers the question.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up.
What was your follow-up?
So there's two different 400,000s. One 400,000, is this correct? 400,000 was passed by the voters through a general operating override. And there's another 400,000 that's not connected to the override that we're going to borrow. Is that what you're saying?
So coincidentally, I'm sorry.
Can you please clarify the second 400,000 that you are referencing and where it is coming from?
I believe the town manager just said that they're two $400,000 amounts and they're not the same. One is the override 400,000 that's being added to the capital stabilization fund. I believe that I'm quoting it correctly. The second 400,000 is Article 14 that we're going to borrow now. So those are different. This isn't Article 14.
I understand now. Thank you very much. To the town manager, can you please clarify the $400,000 that is being brought into the stabilization fund, this article for the $400,000, is that taking the $400,000 out of the stabilization fund at this time for this year?
Sure. So the voters approved a $400,000 general override. Coincidentally, the cost of the engineering work that we're requesting this evening is also $400,000. But the cost to do that work will be borrowed. So we will not be paying $400,000 directly out of the capital stabilization fund. We will borrow that money and we will pay that over, as the select board member mentioned, typically over a 15-year period. So hopefully that clarifies. There will not be an annual payment in FY24, FY25 out of the capital stabilization fund of $400,000. We will just be paying the debt service on what we borrow on that $400,000 in engineering services.
Thank you. Further on the question?
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Jared Cumming, Precinct 4. I think we can all agree that every person in this room is fully supportive of the safety of children and having this project done. And so that, I think, can come off the table for discussion. It is really a question of voting yes on Article 14, is voting to spend up to $300,000 in interest to borrow $400,000. So essentially doubling the cost over the life of the loan, rather than taking something like 13%, $400,000 would be 13% of a $3 million ARPA fund, to fund the project now directly without incurring additional debt in a town that currently has $194 million in debt, not including Lynch. So I would urge the town to vote no on Article 14, support taking the $400,000 and spending it directly now, rather than incurring almost double the cost of that in interest. Thank you very much.
Further on the question?
Roger Wilson, Precinct 1. I have a couple of questions. One comment to Ms. Welch's point about capital spending in particularly in this area. In the neighborhood on Sylvester Street, the sidewalks have WPA tags periodically. So those sidewalks have been in service for 80 years. I think they were a good investment. Another comment is on the capital needs. We had a policy of devoting retiring debt to capital, and we changed that policy, and we'd be in a better position capital-wise if we'd kept that policy. So my questions are pretty specific. Does this anticipated project include a pedestrian bridge from the Sylvester Street side of the Lynch? That's one question. The second question is, does it include narrowing Pond Street, which I think, especially with the new 4-foot rule for passing vulnerable users, would be a problem? And then also, how does this engineering cost? We've already spent 75, then 400, so 475. How does that compare as a percent of the actual building cost compared to McCall? How much did we spend on engineering versus the actually building out the project around McCall?
Thank you very much. So to the town manager, can you please provide us information about the stage of the engineering, and if it's not there yet, if they will consider doing a pedestrian bridge for Sylvester Street, Narrow Pond Street?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. There is, as part of this school project, not as part of the work that we're discussing this evening, there is a pedestrian bridge proposed from the Horn Pond Brook neighborhood on the north side of the bridge that goes across to the Lynch School. There is a pedestrian bridge proposed as part of the school project, not as part of this project that we're discussing this evening.
The second question is the engineering costs, if you could remember off the top of your head, for McCall versus the cost of construction.
I apologize. I don't have a great memory for what the engineering costs were for the McCall school project as part of the overall construction related to the transportation. So I don't have the answer to that question, unfortunately. I believe there was another question about Pond Street. Right.
Narrowing Pond Street.
There were, as part of the initial concept plans that we developed, Tool did propose, just for discussion purposes, the possibility of doing some bump outs on Pond Street at Chesterford Road and some of the other intersections. One of the options would be to bump the curb line out into Pond Street. I think part of the conversations we had during the public information sessions was that we understood that could cause an issue for bike users on Pond Street, and so we wanted to get community feedback on that. There is nothing set in stone as of yet. We have, as part of this $400,000, included a significant amount of money for community outreach and public meetings so that we can get sufficient feedback from residents and school users and other folks in the community about the scope of this project. So I don't want anybody to think that something that they may have seen in one of those initial meetings last fall is a done deal. We are at the concept stage right now, and the goal of this $400,000 is to get us to final engineering. Thank you.
Thank you. Further on the question, stage left, Mike.
Actually, Mr. Deering was in line before me if you would like to go.
Go ahead. I'm just going back and forth. Go ahead, Mr. Deering.
Thank you. Madam Moderator, just a little bit of a clarification. We're looking at $400,000, and I think it's all being tied to Lynch. So my question is, how much of that $400,000 is going to be spent for the project at Lynch? Because I understand that you're putting it in the stabilization fund, and if you had the $400,000 there, you could be using it for other projects. So I guess my point is, we're all focusing, thinking $400,000 is going to be spent on Lynch, but it could very well be spent on other projects. So I have a clarification on that, please.
Thank you. With the vote of Article 14, can staff please provide town meeting the estimated total amount that will be borrowed of the $400,000 that will be dedicated to Lynch traffic engineering and construction?
We did not provide an estimate on the band payment for the $400,000 overall for the estimated $3 million construction project, which includes the engineering portion of it. We are estimating that we would be somewhere around $280,000 to $300,000 a year in debt service payments. Obviously, there's a lot of unknowns. By the time we borrow, interest rates will do what they'll do in those intervening years, but that was the estimate that we provided at the time.
Thank you. Is that Mr. Deering?
Well, I think when they're given this number, you're figuring the construction cost as well. What I'm saying is, I think everybody's, at least I am, thinking that you were looking for this $400,000 to do your engineering study because you don't know what the construction is going to be until you do the engineering study. But I've also understand that the selectmen saying that they could use some of this $400,000 in the stabilization fund for other capital projects. So what I'm trying to get clear is how much of that $400,000 will be spent for the Lynch project. Now, I have no problem with spending it in other capital programs. I'm just saying everybody's thinking this is all for Lynch, and I think it probably is not all for Lynch. And I'd like to know how much you anticipate that in the beginning of this with engineering studies, how much of that $400,000 will actually be logged against the Lynch School?
So the question before town meeting under Article 14 is the only thing that we are voting on right now is to authorize the borrowing of $400,000 for engineering to figure out the total cost thereafter. All other decisions have not been made because this body hasn't had it before them. So all we are voting on right now is to appropriate $400,000 for borrowing for engineering services to figure out the plan for construction around Lynch. With that, I am allowing questions on expanding that because it does help you understand the context of that 400, but right now the motion before you is just to borrow $400,000 for engineering. Go ahead.
Through you, Madam Moderator, I think to the chair of the Capital Planning Committee. I want to untangle this a little bit more. I think the town manager helped a lot. So I understand the override was $400,000. That will start being collected in July 1. So theoretically, in fiscal year 24, we will collect $400,000 into the Capital Stabilization Fund. The proposition on the table is to borrow against the Capital Stabilization Fund, coincidentally, $400,000 for the study for Lynch, and use the Capital Stabilization Fund to service that debt payment, which I'm going to ballpark is going to be about $40,000 a year if I take the same rough math on the $3 million. So my first question is, knowing that we'll be collecting $400,000 from the taxpayers and only spending $40,000 on this project, how is the Capital Planning Committee thinking about using the other $360,000 that remains? I understand that you're thinking it will eventually be used to pay the debt service on the $3 million construction cost. I'm curious if we think that will hit in FY24 or if that will actually more likely come in FY25. And if so, then how will you use the gap, or are you just letting that grow in the Capital Stabilization Fund? Hopefully that made sense.
To the Capital Planning Committee, can you please provide information on the remaining money that was done under the vote by the town and what the gap? So if this passes, we will be borrowing money for the $400,000 to do engineering studies for Lynch. Thereafter, there will be remainder money that is coming in due to the vote, the townwide vote that is placed in the stabilization fund. What is the plan to use that money until it is used thereafter for the project development and construction?
Good insight. The answer is, first off, we will not have a payment on that debt until FY25. So for 1 year only, $400,000 will go into the Capital Stabilization Fund and will be available for other projects. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is when people are using numbers for construction and things like that, we're probably 18 months out on that. So we have concept drawings for what wants to be done. We don't really know if it's going to be, $3 million or what it's going to be. So there's extra money in there. We advised putting extra money in there because 18 months is a long time with the acceleration that we're seeing. So for 1 year, yes, we see $400,000. We can't count on seeing any additional funds beyond that at our discretion. It may fall out differently. We may actually see some benefit in the shorter term, but yes, 1 year we'll see a bump of $400,000.
Thank you.
So, sorry, Madam Moderator, the other part of my question is, how are we utilizing the $400,000 that will exist in FY24 if not related to this project?
That'll just go through the normal stabilization, the normal capital planning process. We'll get a list of projects that come out of the departments. We'll go through our ranking process, and we'll just basically have in the Capital Stabilization Fund $400,000 more for 1 year than we were anticipating.
Madam Moderator, may I ask one more clarifying question?
I probably was going to say what you were going to ask, but go ahead.
So, am I correct in understanding that the $400,000 from the override is not currently committed to projects or being requested at this Springtown meeting?
No, that's correct. No, it is not.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Further on the question, Mr. Nixon.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. There were some questions about the cost of traffic and safety improvements at the McCall Middle School that was referenced earlier. So I'd just like to clarify, McCall was a two-phase expansion project. Phase 2, which was a debt exclusion override, was around $10.5 million. And in collaboration with the Select Board and in deference to that 2018 policy Mr. Betancourt mentioned this evening, we added $500,000 to that ask. So $500,000 to fund the initial traffic counts, conceptual design, in hopes that that would get us down the road, bad pun, on some improvements associated with the Phase 2 debt exclusion override. However, that money fell way short. So Article 16, Fall Town Meeting 2019, Capital came back here and asked for $925,000 to finish that work, which is the reconstruction of Washington and Maine and so forth that Mr. Betancourt mentioned. So one can think of McCall as being somewhere around $1.4-ish million. Certainly that's much smaller scope in comparison to, I think, the 11 or 12 projects that have been suggested by Toole in and around the Lynch neighborhood. So I hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for that background and history. Mr. Nixon always delivers.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Tim Matthews, Precinct 1. I have a series of hopefully short questions that can potentially hope to do what Ms. Allison was trying to do, which is to move us a little closer on this. So first of all, to the Chair of the Finance Committee, is the ARPA funding mechanism the only recommendation that the Finance Committee has for funding this particular article?
To FinCom, can you please provide town meeting if ARPA is the only source of funding that you're recommending for this?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Through you to the town meeting member. No, we had started this. I mean, the first two is the first ARPA, right? If it's the highest priority, and then the second is the Capital Planning Committee, as you just heard, right? The $400,000 that's been collected as of starting in July is not designated. It could be identified for this project. So those are the two that we've listed, not just ARPA. So thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much, Madam Moderator. My second and third questions then are to the Select Board. Question number 1, is it the position of the Select Board that they do not plan to allocate the ARPA funds under any circumstances to the Lynch traffic engineering study? And the second question to the Select Board is, does the Select Board believe that town meeting should be the vehicle for allocating funds for this particular project?
To the Select Board, do you need to have a moment to confer on that? Or do you know the answer? What is the position of the Select Board on using ARPA funds for the Lynch traffic?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Thank you, Mr. Matthews. We haven't discussed it, as I mentioned before. Nothing's off the table for us. This is high priority. That would, take a substantial amount of other projects and push them off as well. So, as you saw from Mr. McPeak's presentation, time matters and it's money for us, right? So, if we come back here a year from now and we say we pushed off these projects and now we need this costs another $80,000, this costs another $90,000. This is another $150,000. It's a little bit of a shell game, and so what we need to do right now, and why this is before spring town meeting, is we need this engineering so we can push the project forward and we can avoid future cost increases, which will ultimately reduce the scope of the project, right? So the scope that we identified is the one that we think is appropriate based on the traffic study, and as Ms. Rudolph mentioned, part of what the cost of the whole project is at this point is community outreach and seeing what the neighborhood thinks and what really will benefit safety in that area. So I hope that answered your question.
Do you want the second one answered?
Yeah, that would be great.
The second question is the Select Board feel at this time that town meeting is the appropriate avenue for the allocation of this project?
Well, I mean, they are whether we like it or not. I mean, so yeah, I think this all comes down to trust, and good government is based on trust, and certainly I appreciate the Finance Committee pushing back. They're asking the right questions, and for us, we have to deliver a safety project for kids at a new school that we're investing nearly $100 million in. And so, as I said, time is money, and you know, we put this question out because we felt that it was important, and this is the best way to fund the engineering for it now and keep the project moving forward. It is painful for us. We can wait a couple months here and there, and project costs go up, and we're constantly. I mean, Lake Street Bridge is a perfect example of it. We were not expecting to do that bridge. It came in the middle of a high expense time during COVID that it was identified as a state as high risk, and we've been chasing money ever since to try to fund it. So we don't want that to be one of these projects as well, because when the doors open for that school, we need to know that those kids are safe.
Thank you.
Madam Moderator, can I ask one follow-up question to the Select Board?
Getting late. It's
Okay.
getting late. Let's go.
Here we go. I'm going to try and to do this. So my question to the Select Board is, if we decide that the borrowing of the money is not an appropriate way to move this project forward, that there is a concern on the floor of town meeting that the borrowing and the extra cost that's associated with that is not something that the sense of town meeting would support, does the Select Board support changing the funding mechanism either to draw the $400,000 directly from the Capital Stabilization Fund or from free cash, or is there another method that they might be open to?
No, not yet. I'm going to give the Select Board a minute to have a conversation about this.
Yeah, thank you again for the question. So, as I was mentioning, the town meeting is kind of like the Super Bowl for us. You know, it's a big build-up, and we have a long runway, and we try to anticipate as much as possible. If we were to identify another funding source, we would have to come back to town meeting, 6 months from now, and ask for that transfer. We would have to go to the Capital Stabilization Fund and the Capital Planning Committee, ask for that recommendation, and then come back essentially with the same request, right? It's still money that's going into the stabilization fund, and that they've already recommended should be coming out for this particular purpose. They are co-sponsors of this article with us. So we don't always agree on everything, but we happen to agree on this one thing. We felt like it was important, and again, time is money. If we've got to come back in the fall, we're looking at absolutely increase in cost for this project, and we're looking at a potential delay of the project. We'll be out of the construction plan with the school project then.
So clarifying question for Madam Moderator, if she'll accept it.
Do you want me to ask it?
Yeah, I think you know what I'm.
Will the Select Board be willing to use ARPA funds to fund this? That if you need a minute, take time. I can take the next question while you discuss.
I was going to.
Thank you. I'm going to let the Select Board answer the question. Mr. Mucci, Chair of the Select Board.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. Thank you, Madam Moderator. So we're here tonight. This is the next logical step in this process. I've shepherded this project since last year when I came before this body and asked for $75,000 for design funding that led to, and I see Erica in the back today who did the study. That started this on its runway. From there, we had the report from Tool. We engaged the neighbors. I came back in the fall and spent about 40 hours of my life going to various meet and greets and informational sessions led by the school committee for the Lynch project, and talked about traffic in public sessions. We talked about it at our select board table, and we tried to figure out what was the best funding mechanism based on the totality of the circumstances of what we were seeing through all these different projects in town. We were seeing in all the projects
voters. 88 required.
I can do it by oral vote if you come up here.
Can you open the vote back up, please?
Or do you want to open it up?
Revote it, please. Yeah. So the moderator's discretion, the call is until I officially call the whole motion. I did not. We have a technical problem, so we're going to have to revote it. So give us a minute. I'm going to reopen it up in 30 seconds.
Give them 45.
Before I call it, I'm going to let you scroll through it to make sure all of your votes are there. Can you scroll through it? Can you scroll through all of them, please?
Am I even up there? Yeah, it failed.
118 voters having voted. 79 require for passing. There are 62 in the affirmative and 56 in the negative. The motion does not pass. Returning to question before us on Article 14.
Madam Moderator, I would like to make a motion to amend Article 14 to amend the funding source to the Capital Stabilization Fund.
Second.
Who's a second?
Me. Tim Matthews, Precinct 1.
Thank you.
Sorry, Samantha Allison, Precinct 3.
We just got to write it real quick, so give us 1 minute. From the capital stabilization. Yeah, for engineering services for traffic improvements associated with the Lynch Associates School project in the surrounding neighborhood. So the current before us, there is a motion to amend the motion for Article 14. The motion to amend is that 400,000, it's moved and second that 400,000 be appropriated from the Capital Stabilization Fund to pay the cost of engineering services for traffic improvements associated with Lynch Elementary School project and in the surrounding neighborhoods. Yes, everything thereafter in the article is stricken. So just as I read it. At this point now, we will debate the motion to amend. The proponent of the motion for amendment, did you have anything further to say? Any questions or comments? All right, let's take a vote. Oh, they didn't rise. To the chair of the Capital Planning Committee, can you please provide your recommendation under the motion to amend?
I can't provide a recommendation. We've had no opportunity as a committee to discuss this at all, so this is really very unusual. I'll just say that this does not help capital. This basically, we were going to see 400,000 before that would come in for other capital projects. Really unusual, I've got to say that. I don't think I've seen this one before. But no, we can't make a recommendation one way or another on this because we're not all here either.
All right, thank you very much. Recommendation from the Select Board.
I think unanimously the select board does not support the motion. As Roger has pointed out, it does not help capital, whereas if we borrow the money, capital would receive the benefit for this 1 year of increased funding, and then we would be able to, the ban would not kick in until the fall FY25 for the borrowing for this one project, and would start us on our way for the borrowing of this construction project. So I just think in the end it hurts capital for this year.
Do you have a recommendation from FinCom?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. It looks like a unanimous vote from the Finance Committee to fund this, for the amendment to fund this through Capital Planning Committee.
Any town meeting members, questions or comments? Seeing none rise, we will be moving now to vote for the motion to amend Article 14, so that therefore will state as moved and seconded that $400,000 is appropriated from the Capital Stabilization Fund to pay costs of engineering services for traffic improvements associated with the Lynch Elementary School project and in the surrounding neighborhoods.
Point of order.
Yep.
Does the amendment require simple majority or 2/3? Given the article as written, it's a 2/3 vote.
The actual motion itself or the motion to amend?
Motion to amend.
The motion to amend is a simple majority. With that, Town Council has asked for amendment just for clarity. Sorry, we were doing it on the fly. So the motion to amend will actually, I'm going to reread it with the corrections. We need to give who's going to be the authority to distribute the money thereafter. So I'm going to reread it as it correctly should be. Is moved and seconded that $400,000 is appropriated to pay costs of engineering services for traffic improvements associated. That $400,000 is appropriated from the Capital Stabilization Fund to pay costs of engineering services for traffic improvements associated with the Lynch Elementary School project and in the surrounding neighborhoods. The town manager shall be authorized to have oversight of the project, and that in accordance with Section 4-2 of the Town of Winchester Home Rule Charter, the town manager shall have the authority to enter into contracts and approve payments with respect to the project. So the change that I just read into the record is giving the town manager the authority to manage the contracts associated with the engineering practices that the $400,000 would be used to. Do you agree to that? Thank you. And at this point, town meeting, I think it might be best actually to postpone this to a time second. Do I have a motion? Do we have a second? Thank you. The reason is if we want to get this written correctly, the motion, doing it on the fly is not actually practical at this moment. We need to have staff do it and write it correctly so that it is accurate. so then you know exactly what you're voting on. Doing it right now on the fly will take us too long. You'll be sitting here for another 10 minutes waiting for it to be written and drafted.
You can postpone it to a time certain, being the last article for tonight, and just give me a few minutes and go on to it.
All right. To postpone it to a time certain, we'd like to do it as a last order of business of Monday, because it's a fiscal year 24 item, because that's where it would be being drawn from. So we actually are unable to vote on that this evening, the motion to amend. So with that, our town bylaws state that fiscal year 24 items cannot be voted on and decided by this body until Monday. So at this time, we cannot take that motion to amend under our consideration until is Monday. So with that, and it needs to be vetted to make sure it has all the correct language so that it is appropriate for what the intention of the motion maker is. So with that, I would like town meeting to consider to postpone this article into the first order of business on Monday, May 1st. Yes?
You can do that too. The maker of the motion can withdraw it too, now that she has the information. No, if she withdraws it, then we can vote on the other one. Well, that's a good point.
We can't really, it's not a debate. The question is the question was to the moderator, and the question is why don't I just rule it out of order? And we just vote on the original article. But I don't think that is in the best interest of the meeting or the topic before us, so I'm going to wait. I'd like to put before the town meeting that we indefinitely postpone. We postpone to a time certain of the first order of business on Monday, May 1st, and when we have everything, so you have all the information, and you can vote appropriately as you see fit. We're going to... It's just... Yes? Absolutely.
As well as the Finance Committee to explain why this is better for the town.
Thank you.
It is likely that if this comes up again, there would be a motion to change capital stabilization fund towards free cash as a separate amendment to the motion.
Thank you for letting everyone know, but you can email everyone and let them all know, and then they can...
The point being, if it were that and moved now to do that, can we vote on it tonight? It would not be fiscal year 20.
No, because at the same time, we need staff to have time to draft it correctly. Yep. Yes. They need 48 hours to post, although council can correct me if I'm wrong, when there's items like this that are under time constraints that they could not have predicted they're able to meet. Is that correct, Mr. Tellerman?
Certainly not reasonably anticipated.
Thank you. It's just a simple majority. It's just a simple majority. I'm going to try a voice vote first instead of using the clickers because it'll expedite time. All those in favor of postponing the motion to amend Article 14 to the first item of business on Monday, May 1st, all say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very much. Give me 1 second while we move onward to the next article. We're moving on to Article 15 on page 20 of your spring annual town meeting warrant booklet. I do anticipate these should move fairly quickly, so if you can stay with us so we can have a quorum and close these out, that would be grateful. It is moved and seconded that the town appropriate $175,000 from free cash for flood mitigation project maintenance related to vegetation management, wetland and tree vegetation tagging and permitting, including engineering services, construction, and all other costs incidental and related thereto.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, town meeting members. I'm here tonight to present on behalf of Article 15, which requests funding for maintenance of one of our completed flood mitigation projects. The town has made significant investments in our flood mitigation program, which is designed to reduce the impacts of flooding along the Arizona River and its tributaries. The town began this work in the mid-1990s and has completed all but one of the proposed flood mitigation projects. Going forward, it's important that the town adequately maintains the projects that have already been completed to ensure that they operate as designed for the full flood mitigation benefits so that the full flood mitigation benefits are maintained. Project 2 of the town's flood mitigation program was completed in 2012 and included widening of the Arizona River downstream of the Waterfield Road Bridge adjacent to the Mystic Valley Parkway. The figure at the top shows the improvements as designed. The channel widening required installation of a one-to-one slope on the eastern side of the river using an engineered geogrid product for slope stability. The area was planted according to an approved landscaping plan, but over the years, additional vegetation has grown in, as can be seen in the photo at the bottom left. The photo at the bottom right shows an example of the geogrid material that was used to stabilize the slope. That photo is not from our project, just as an example so you can see what it looks like. Allowing trees and other large vegetation to grow into the engineered slope could break apart the geogrid material and compromise the structural stability of the slope. In fall 2021, town meeting funded the design and permitting of vegetation maintenance associated with the channel widening project. The towns received an order of conditions from the Conservation Commission last year, and I'm here this evening to request $175,000 from free cash to complete final engineering and construction of the project. The work includes removal of problematic vegetation and invasive species along the eastern bank of the Arizona River between Waterfield Road Bridge and Manchester Road, and planting of new vegetation as approved by the Conservation Commission, as well as annual monitoring for a period of 2 years after construction is complete. Funding for this project was initially requested through the capital planning process, but the capital planning committee rejected the request because it was for maintenance of an already completed project. As a result, we are requesting the project be funded from free cash instead. Thank you.
Thank you. May we have a recommendation from the Select Board?
The Select Board unanimously voted to support this article.
May we have a recommendation from FinCom?
The Finance Committee unanimously supports this article too.
Any comments or questions from town meeting members?
Through you to the proponents, Madam Moderator, 175,000 is a lot for cutting brush, and I'm wondering what's the breakdown between cutting brush, which should take a few days, and planting new vegetation. And I paddle up this stretch fairly often, and I would say that plastic stuff there is failing. It's failing at the water line anyhow right now. But if you could provide more detail as to why this costs so much.
To the town manager, can you please provide town meeting information on the breakdown of the $175,000 and what that is dedicated to?
Sure, thank you. So part of it is to complete the design and bid services. Part of it is for construction administration services with our engineering firm to be out there to observe construction. And then also part of it is for long-term monitoring and reporting back to our Conservation Commission. It's more than just cutting brush. This is engineered slope, and so it's careful vegetation maintenance and trimming and root removal to ensure that we're not damaging the geogrid material, which is what is holding up that whole slope. And it's replanting of new material, which is not easy on a one-to-one slope. It's also invasive species management. So I realize it sounds like a very expensive endeavor. It is critical to protecting our over $4 million investment that the town put into completing this flood mitigation project. It is something that we're going to have to look to do. You know, this project is 10 years old. I would assume somebody will back to you in another 10 to 15 years to look at doing a similar project. If we don't do this, we risk having the eastern side of the slope, which holds up Mystic Valley Parkway, fail and having a much bigger, expensive problem on our hands. So I would encourage you to support this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Further on the question?
Answer, Precinct 1. Do we have a recommendation from Conservation Commission?
I believe this was requested by the Conservation Commission, but do we have a member of the Conservation Commission here? Town Manager, I believe that you said that the Conservation Commission requested this of you?
No, it's a town manager article. I put it forward to capital planning as town engineer several years ago. We did, as I said, in fall of 2021, we got money from town meeting to support the permitting for this project. And we did over the last year obtain an order of conditions from the Conservation Commission.
Your slide says that they approved.
Yes, they approved the project by issuing an order of conditions for the project.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Any other further questions? I see town meeting is ready for the article. It is a simple majority. I'm going to try a voice vote first. If it doesn't sound like I can understand it, we'll go to our clickers. All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? The ayes have it. The motion passes. And the last article before us is Article 17. And after that, we will adjourn until Monday. Article 17 is for the appropriate money for traffic calming mitigation for the Eversource line. It is moved and seconded that the town appropriate $20,000 from free cash to supplement the traffic calming account number 0398882 for the implementation of one or more traffic calming measures to mitigate existing traffic and pedestrian impacts caused by the Eversource 345 kV project as agreed to in the Memorandum of Understanding between Eversource and the town. This is brought to you by the town manager. A majority vote is required, and it is on page 22 of your motion booklet.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I don't have any slides for this one. Hopefully it should be fairly quick. This, as Madam Moderator mentioned, this project is related to construction of the 345 kV transmission line that's going on right now. That is one of the two Eversource transmission line projects that is happening. The 115 project is largely complete. That work was going from the Woburn substation down Bacon Street through Sims Corner into Medford. The project we're talking about tonight is the 345 kV project, which is also going from the Woburn substation down Cross Street, down Washington Street, and into Woburn. In 2021, the town negotiated a MOU with Eversource related to this project. Under the agreement, Eversource agreed to contribute up to $200,000 to the town to offset the cost of traffic calming projects along the Cross Street corridor to mitigate existing traffic and pedestrian safety issues. The payments to the town are contingent upon the completion of certain milestone tasks by Eversource as part of their construction. Town meeting appropriated the first $10,000 payment in fall of 2021 to a dedicated fund that will be used for the stated purpose. This spring, town meeting is being asked to appropriate an additional $20,000 that has been received by the town since that time, since the fall of 2021. Staff expects that Eversource will continue to make payments to the town as part of the MOU as the project milestones are completed, and that subsequent articles will be brought forward to town meeting for appropriation until we get to that $200,000 amount. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Recommendation from the Select Board.
The Select Board unanimously voted favorable action on this article.
Recommendation from FinCom.
The Finance Committee voted unanimously to support this article.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from town meeting members? Seeing no one rise, I believe you're ready for the question. We are voting on to appropriate $20,000 for traffic calming mitigation per Eversource. This is Article 17. A majority vote is required. I will try a voice vote first. If not, we will move to our clickers if I cannot determine it. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion passes. I look forward to seeing you all again on Monday, May 1st at 6:30. May I get a motion to adjourn? All right. Thank you very much. Have a great night and have a great weekend.